Okay, so in this video, we're going to be covering the therapeutic technique in challenging shoulds. This is a really important technique because, well, as people, we have standards. We're creatures that search for meaning and search for truth and value. And well, shoulds is a really shoulds and shouldn'ts are a way we do that. If you think about how complex the world is, you know, one way of thinking about shoulds is almost a way of reducing the complexity of this dynamic, complex world around us to two categories, should and shouldn't. And it's a useful tool. As a clinician, you don't want to try and get rid of a person's ability to size up the world they're living in. Really, when we're tackling shoulds, what you're seeing is an overemphasis on this way of sizing up the world. It's a certain rigidity, and it's a perfectionism, really. The standard that it's not this ennobling compass that enables a person to search out and find meaning and real conviction in their life, which they need. Values are just essential in driving a life worth living, but become this judging oppressor, bringing out guilt, shame, the self-criticism, that the more that sort of criticism comes about, becomes this oppression that, how could a person carry those sorts of burdens? Yet they do, because, well, who doesn't want to be successful? Who doesn't want to be perfect? And that's what these shoulds are really driving a person to do. But again, this idea of perfection is it's too much to carry. So the basic approach in challenging shoulds is really this idea, it's come out of the lab of Albert Ellis and Beck, that oftentimes where you'll see these shoulds have gone off the rails is because these statements people tell themselves, well, they're really illogical oftentimes. In the sense they're overgeneralized, that they might apply in specific circumstances, but become so overblown. It's like, again, this idea you can't carry that sort of burden, and that's what makes them dysfunctional ideas. So as a clinician, this technique is really challenging the shoulds, trying to limit them, or find a place where you're not completely invalidating them, because there is what to say. I mean, every should does have this kernel, or rather big kernel of truth that can be enlivening, that can be a source of a vital life. But again, it's because they're just so broad that they've become this burden almost no one could carry. So again, the general strategy here is really trying to deconstruct these shoulds, showing how they have gone above and beyond really what's useful in a person's life. They get overgeneralized in different ways. So, one question to pose is, well, okay, targeting the evidence of the should. Well, what evidence do you have in your life that you should be perfect? Is there evidence maybe that it's too much to ask of yourself to be perfect? It's asking really to size up the data in a person's life to try and create almost like a way of looking, well, is it useful, is it not useful to use this idea of should? Another question to ask, another angle on this, is searching out the history. Where did this idea of should come from? A lot of times the way we look at our lives, especially morally, and our lives that are the parts of our lives that are value driven, often come from parents, people we admire, and it's worth figuring out, well, who are those figures in a person's life, to be able to root it. Oh, okay, well, that's your starting position. Well, were those people perfect? Did they make mistakes? Was it useful for them? Are you the same person as they are? So challenging the historical development of the ideas of perfect is a second strategy. Another way of challenging these thoughts is asking, well, wouldn't it be more realistic to think about shoulds maybe more as preferences? Would that actually help you do a better job in life? So here, all these techniques really challenge the idea of usefulness, but this one was really targeting, how's that working for you, man? Is this idea of should taking you where you want to go, or is it taking your life in a different direction? Another way of challenging these ideas is to broaden, it's more abstract, but broaden the idea of should of, well, is it worth treating everyday occurrences as big moral issues? That it might be you're inviting too much complexity into your life, that it's too much of a burden. Another way of challenging these ideas is to see if reframing could be useful. Maybe instead of identifying things in your life as shoulds and shouldn'ts, well, maybe you can have preferences instead. And that can be really hard for people. A lot of times the preferences, which it's natural to have preferences. Every person, it's not just that you're entitled to have preferences, but preferences are a manifestation of your personality. Preferences are really who you are. It's no small thing to have a preference. But a lot of times people feel insecure that they have preferences, almost like, they have to prove that it's okay or prove that it's legitimate to have those preferences, and they clothe their preferences in ideas of should. Well, it might be worth challenging that and scaling it back a little bit and saying, well, wait a second, maybe there's something worth to preferences, and that might be a more flexible way of looking at your life that could be useful for you. And finally, another way of challenging these thoughts is really putting it to the client. You have to kind of do this delicately because you don't want to become too pessimistic, but really putting on the table, it looks like this idea of should has brought this problem in your life, this problem in your life, this problem in your life. You've tried to use it in an assortment of different ways. And from the story you're telling me, is it actually has been has made your life more challenging and painful than rewarding. Does this idea really help you? Or maybe there's another way of thinking about your life. So using those several techniques, you can start chipping away at the idea of should and opening up a flexibility, a sense of maybe there's more potential and more possibility in a person's life. And you're really trying to zero in on, it's okay to have preferences. It's okay to have wants that are coming from you, and they don't have to be justified all the time. It's lowering that bar of success from perfectionism to effectiveness, so a person can feel more reward in their life. Because ultimately that the burden that shoulds carry is that you can never reach those goals. You can never reach that standard. So who would want to live that life that's empty of reward, is empty of success? You're really trying to sell the idea that maybe you need to have another measure of how you look at your life, opening up those positive, rewarding experiences. And that really becomes the fuel to slightly and gently always set that bar higher. It's not through this rigid punishing sort of strategy that a person ultimately becomes successful in their life. But it's recognizing their own limitations, setting that bar lower, being real with yourself, that you can start incrementally becoming a bigger person. Because I think at the end of the day, again, it's worth not throwing away the idea of should. People are moral creatures. People are searching for meaning. But you can't take the whole world on all at once. It's something you have to grow into. That's what you should do. I hope this video has been useful. If you enjoyed it, please click on like, and you can go ahead and check out my other videos on YouTube and Patreon. Take it easy.